This is my channel's weekly compendium, ending Monday, May 15th, 2023. Case file number 1098, written by It's On Gaming, the Twilight Zone episode that happened in my room. I was about 16 at the time, and I had just gotten a new TV to put in my room so that I could use the Xbox on it. It came with one remote. I remember specifically because I was very spacey and tended to lose things, so I wanted a second one, just in case. Well, cut to about 3 months later, I lost the remote. I sleep with it on my nightstand and I don't remember moving it or dropping it or anything, but one day I went to grab it and it wasn't on my nightstand. I looked everywhere for that thing. It was driving me crazy. Until a few days later, when I looked in between my bed and the wall. I'd already looked there, at least I thought so, and it was just there. I was absolutely elated, until when I pulled the bed back to actually grab it. 2 remotes fell. Exactly the same brand, same wear on the input and select button. The number 2 was rubbed off on both of them, and what really blew my mind is the batteries were the same mismatch of Duracell and whatever brand it came with. Turned the same amount. Anybody else have a duplication glitch? Would you like even more content? Here's my Patreon, now onto the stories. Case file number 1099, written by Lee Harris 100. The Day the Universe Saved Me. When I was in school, I had this hippie teacher who would always tell us that the universe can help if you just ask it. She told us one time her daughter had lost something very important, and when she asked the universe to help, she suddenly had a massive pulling feeling towards the sink. She walked over and immediately stuck her hand down into the garbage disposal and pulled the item out in perfect condition. So I think it's total nonsense, of course. But later that day, I was searching for a little thin booklet that I really needed for school. I spent 3 hours looking for it and had no luck. Finally, out of frustration, I almost sarcastically said, "I need your help, universe." I immediately walked over to this bookcase filled with books from my stepdad. I had never once used the shelf or any book on it. I grab a random book I've never seen from the middle of a huge pile. I open it to somewhere around page 200, and right there is my booklet, smashed in between the pages. It was incredibly thin, so you couldn't even tell there was anything in there if you looked at it from a different angle. I'm sure there's a good explanation, but it's been well over a decade, and I still remember the incredibly freaky vibe I got the moment I saw the book. Case file number 1100, written by Anonymous. Entwined in Laos, a story of fate. Back in 2011, my significant other and I were backpacking in Laos, and we ended up in that very isolated village called Muang Nuai. To get there, you need to take a 3-hour bus from Luang Prabang to Nong Kia, then a 1-hour ride upriver on a fisherman's boat. There are no roads to reach the village, and once there, there's no internet, no mobile network, and electricity is only for a couple hours in the evenings. It's a beautiful area though, mountainous with caves to visit, riverside beach, etc. Although not completely off the map, it's a place where few travelers go, and it happened to be off-season when we went there, so there were no more than 10 or 15 visitors in the whole village at the time we were there. In the evening, everyone returns from the treks, cave crawls and boat rides, and gather in the only bar/hostel of the village on an elevated wooden terrace by the river. The night falls, and little by little, groups merge and everyone ends up sitting on big pillows, sipping cocktails and talking about life and travels like they're old buddies, whereas no one knew each other just a few hours before. To this day, this is one of my favorite backpacking memories, and what came soon after made it even more memorable. So there was this Australian woman, Ronnie, who took the same boat as us to get there. She's a bit odd, something off about her. She tells people how she was diagnosed with a terminal illness but made a miraculous recovery, and now she's traveling everywhere in Asia with the funds that her friends had collected for what was supposed to be her last trip, bucket list. Then there was this other Australian guy, Ken, who arrived one day after us. He is quite the traveler, and quite the talker too. There are also Spanish, American, and French people. At one point, someone asks Ken if he's married. He starts joking about it, but then he proceeds to tell the story of how one day, about 20 years ago, his wife, who was from New Zealand, just vanished. She left him without warning, a note, or anything. They got in touch later to arrange the divorce, but Ken said he never saw her again, and he never heard anything from her after the divorce. He told the story with humor, but you could tell that this had been a devastating experience for him. At that point, Ronnie, with a very calm voice, inquires, "Was her name Karen?" I look at Ken and see his face decompose, going from brash and confident to livid. The place falls silent. "Yes," he replies. "How do you know her name? Do you know her?" Ronnie proceeds to explain how, when she heard this story, she realized that she knew the exact same story but from the wife's perspective. She had met Karen at one point in her life. She described her physically to Ken, and it was an exact match. At this point, we were all looking at each other with big eyes, speechless, stupefied by the scene we were witnessing. So then comes the mega what the fluck moment. Ken asks if she knows what Karen has been up to since they met, and Ronnie replies, "She's dead," with a dead flucking serious tone and face. I swear to God, although I had quite a few drinks, I sobered up instantly, like I was feeling danger. No one was speaking. Everyone was staring. Ken was absolutely stunned. At that point, I was half expecting to see an alien ship come out of the sky or that Ronnie would turn into a demon and eat us alive. She gave some more details about Karen's passing. It was a car accident. But unfortunately, I don't remember much else of what was said after that. Soon after, the bar owner was closing and asked everyone else to leave, and so we called it a night and all went to our rooms, dumbfounded. What are the odds of something like that happening? Case file number 1101, written by Sleazy for Weasley. My car healed itself. I bought a brand new Kia Telluride last year. I keep tweezers in my car because you can't beat that natural light. I'd only had my car for about a week. I was holding my tweezers, I made a right-hand turn, and accidentally sliced a large chunk out of the back of the steering wheel. Devastation. I couldn't believe I had been so foolish. As my fingers wrapped around my steering wheel, I would notice the slash every single time I drove my car for the past year. It was probably about a quarter-inch long. It was a deep cut, very obvious and noticeable. Until last week, I was driving and noticed the slash was gone. When I got home, I peered around the steering wheel. It's completely smooth now, as if there was never a cut. I'm so confused. Every person who had driven my car commented on it. What? Case file number 1102, written by The Snyderman, a time loop of cash. I used to ride my bike to school when I was a freshman in high school. One day after a heavy storm, I was riding my usual route through the parking lot of a local restaurant. I thought I saw some money on the ground, so I stopped and looked. First there was a 20, then another 20, some singles, a 5, and finally a 50. I was shaking as I picked up all the money and looked around to see if I was on a hidden camera show or something. I picked up my bike after shoving the money in my pocket and rode off to school. Later that day, when I got home, I counted all of my new loot and basked in my good fortunes. Fast forward a few years, I actually work at that restaurant now. As a bartender at that particular restaurant, you get to take your cash tips home with you at the end of the night. So I had a particularly good night and figured I would go to the bar next door for a drink. As I'm leaving the bar, it was raining really hard and I was fumbling with my key to my car, and I finally got it in and got home and passed right out from the long shift. I woke up the next morning to find that my earnings from the night before were missing. I figured I must have dropped them in the parking lot when I was fumbling with my keys. I went back to the parking lot and looked around, but to no avail. All in all, I lost, you guessed it, 2 20s, a 5, a couple singles, and a 50. After I got over the fact that I just lost about $100 due to my own stupidity, I was seriously weirded out at the idea that there may have been an infinite loop of me giving myself $100 in the past. Case file number 1103, written by Dying to Meet You 5, The Great Nexus Pass Disappearance. This was during the pandemic, 2021. I, female 53, work in an animal rescue as a cross-border transporter, and I have a Nexus pass to get back and forth. The card is the same size as a driver's license, but it's kept in an RFID envelope to protect the data. One day, I was supposed to go back to the US from Canada, and I reached into the side pocket of my purse where it's kept to pull it out for crossing. The border was closed for regular traffic, but rescues could cross via commercial because having a pet is considered helpful for isolated people. So I reach in, and my pass isn't there. Now here's the odd thing. I had just put the pass in my pocket 30 minutes prior as I was bringing a load into Canada. I knew I had put it there because I checked before I zipped up the pocket. I'm paranoid about losing my pass, so I'm ultra careful with it. I'm trying not to lose my mind because I need to go back, and losing your cool isn't helpful with border agents. I pulled over to the side of the road and methodically went through my purse. Nothing. I empty out my purse completely, looking at each item carefully to make sure I'm not confused. No Nexus pass. I search for the driver's seat. Nope. I get out and do a grid search of my whole vehicle. Not there. I went back to the CBSA office to look around. I asked the officer I dealt with. He tells me that he saw me put it in my purse pocket. I must be losing my mind. I thank him and leave. I check the car and my purse again. Nada. I even went back that night to see if the cleaners found anything. Nope. Meanwhile, I let all my rescuers know that I can't cross. I don't know what's going on, but I order a replacement just in case. I am stuck for a month, waiting for the replacement, periodically searching for the card. It comes, and after I activate it, I go to my purse and put it in the zippered pocket, so I won't lose it again. As soon as I open the pocket, there's my old Nexus pass, while I'm holding on to my new Nexus pass. I've turned that purse inside out, looking for that bloody pass, and it's sitting in the pocket, all pleased as it can be. I feel like I've gone and lost my ever-loving mind, holding 2 Nexus passes. I yelled at the poltergeist that must have been farting around because that pass was gone. I had other people looking for it too. Matrix or whatever, I was hopping irritated. What pocket universe did it slip into for all that time? Case file number 1104, written by Dextroskeletal. The moon moved faster than light. Once, my now ex-wife and I left a friend's house to go back to a house a block down the street. When we left, the moon was in the middle of the sky. By the time we got home, I noticed it was much closer to the horizon. I first thought it was simply the angle from which we had viewed it originally vs where we were viewing it now. As we stood watching it out of the kitchen window, it was actually moving so quickly we could see its position changing in relation to the objects on the horizon. In short order, it was completely gone behind the horizon. I've tried watching the moon once it was near the horizon since, but it's never seemed to move this fast. There was another time I had very intense déjà vu that lasted perhaps half an hour. It was overwhelming. Years later, I started getting déjà vu frequently. I got this idea that I exist in a simulation, and whomever the operators were planning on waking me up. Movies like The Matrix and Vanilla Skies only added to this obsession as I got the idea that the movies were inserted into my life to tell me something. Case file number 1105, written by Savigi13, a duplicated purple Titan Wildcat mountain bike. Context: when I was in high school, 16 or 17, I'm 27 now, my family was, let's just say, lower middle class. I came from a family of 5 kids, I was the oldest, so money was often tight. Despite being driving age, my parents couldn't afford to help me pay for a car, so my bike was the only thing I had if I needed to get somewhere my parents refused to drive me to. Glitch in question. We lived on the corner lot on my block. Because of that, we had a bigger front lawn that my siblings used to leave their bikes out on all the time. My mom used to get pissed because my brother went through bikes left and right. She would always threaten us, saying that if we didn't put our bikes away, they would rust or get stolen, and she wouldn't replace them. One day I got home from a friend right before it started to rain, making it a point to put my bike in the garage ASAP. About 20 minutes later, my mom burst into my room screaming at me about my bike being out in the rain. At this point, I figured maybe my brother had taken my bike and didn't put it back. He did this from time to time. I went outside and found my bike lying on the far corner of our front lawn, right next to the sidewalk. I walked my bike up to the garage, pissed that my brother took my bike without asking. He got me in trouble for it. But when I opened the garage, my bike was already inside, right where I had put it earlier. I stood there utterly confused with literally the exact same bike in my hands, the same brand, the same color, purple Titan Wildcat mountain bike with handbrakes. Same everything, it even looked like my bike, exactly. To this day, I still have no idea where that bike came from. No one ever came to claim it or say it was missing. My siblings also to this day still claim to not be responsible for bringing it home. The bike is actually still hanging in my parents' garage, right next to my actual bike. Thinking about this interaction often leaves me with a weird feeling of being watched. I chose to accept this as a glitch mostly because the alternative of who or whatever left this bike on my lawn being close enough to know what bike I rode and where I lived creeps me out much worse. Has anyone else ever had an item duplicate itself? Case file number 1106, written by Molecule 2003, The Old Man's Warning. 3 years ago, in spring 2013, I used to work at a small manufacturing firm. Every morning I would get on the number 8 bus to get to work. The bus ride takes roughly 10 to 15 minutes. I would arrive at the entrance to my office building, leaving me about 30 minutes early. And as usual, my coworker who works beside my desk would offer to buy me coffee. One morning I was going to work on the usual number 8 bus. I looked out the window and the fog was very thick. I remember it due to the very heavy rain last night. Then, as I slowly looked around, I saw there were only elderly people riding on the bus. Suddenly, an old man sitting behind me whispered, "You shouldn't be here. Get off the next stop quickly." I felt very strange, and following my instinct, I got off the next stop. As soon as I did, I saw a young woman entering the bus. I couldn't see clearly, but I was sure it looked like a familiar face. Then I woke up. I woke up learning it was a dream. I decided to forget about it and prepared to go to work. I realized my loafers were wet from the rain yesterday, so I took out an old pair and headed out. Once out of my apartment building, an old man wearing a security vest was sweeping the grounds of the entrance. I stopped to check that my right shoelace was untied and proceeded to kneel down and tie it. Then out of the blue, the old man said, "Terrible weather, isn't it? Not a great day for cars. Best to walk." As soon as he finished, he turned around to continue sweeping the ground. I couldn't recognize who the man was, even in my 2 years of staying at the apartment. I have never seen him before. I headed towards the bus stop, just a few steps outside the entrance. After standing there for a few minutes, I realized the bus wasn't coming. Then I remember my dream. I decided to walk to work, though it may take up 30 minutes of my time. I arrived at my office not too late. I hurried to my desk as I prepared for a meeting that morning. My coworker, who usually would have a cup of coffee in her hand, said she couldn't buy any coffee at her usual cafe. She started to explain how the manager had closed the cafe and left in a hurry. That afternoon, as I was having my late lunch, I was surfing the internet when the news headline caught me off guard. I started to read about an accident that happened near my apartment. The number 8 bus had crashed into another car as it lost its brake pedals that morning. Among the injured and casualties, a young woman passed away from severe head contusion and blood loss. Judging by the name, I realized it was the wife of the manager of the coffee store my coworker always goes to. That night, as soon as I got off work, I tried checking with my landlord about an old man working in the security staff of my apartment. He thoroughly mentioned he has never hired or seen a man as a security staff. It's been 3 years since that incident. Case file number 1107, written by Mouse 2001, The Fog, the Light, and the Duck. On the first night of my first job, I was driving home from work at around 1 a.m. My first job was washing dishes for a local restaurant, if anyone cares. Apparently, while I was working, some of the thickest fog I've ever seen settled in. I was driving home in this fog, not even able to see a few feet in front of me, when I pulled up to the 4-way intersection that leads to the road my house is on. This particular 4-way intersection is marked by a blinking red streetlight. It's also the only light on the entire street. So here I am, driving through the heaviest fog of my life, on my way home from a crazy night at work, with nothing to light the road. I lived in a small country town, so most roads didn't have street lamps, but my worthless headlights, and the blinking red streetlight off in the distance. As I creep up to the blinking red light, lo and behold, my headlights reveal a single mallard duck standing perfectly still in the middle of the intersection directly under the blinking red streetlight. At this point, I wasn't sure if I was fatigued or crazy because it was 1 a.m., so I began to wonder if it was real, because it was just so weird and was standing perfectly still, so I honked at it. The duck slowly turned its head and stared at me. This was some eerie crap, man. Only me, a duck, heavy fog, and an ominous blinking red light at 1 in the morning. And to make it worse, it was staring at me. Me and the duck were locked in eye contact for a solid minute until I slowly made my turn, the duck's gaze following me as I went, careful not to run him over, and I returned home, not believing what I just saw. To this day, I search for that duck every time I pull up to that intersection, in the hopes that I will get one more look at the mysterious intersection duck of legend. But I never saw him again. Case file number 1108, written by Anonymous. The unbelievable party prank that wasn't a prank. One time, I was throwing a party at my house. Well, at some point, I got pissed at my sister because she was drunk and being belligerent. So I left the house and hung out with some friends who were smoking outside. We ended up leaving and cruising for a couple hours. When I got home, everyone was just looking at me wide-eyed. According to everyone else, when my sister was being a bitch, I went off on her. I started yelling and cussing and eventually stormed into my room, which is connected to the living room where the party is. So apparently, I stormed into my room, slammed the door, and walked in the front door a minute later. I was prepared to go strangle my doppelganger to death, but no one was in the room. Some random details that make this more weird. They all said I was incredibly drunk, but after 2 or 3 hours of sober cruising, I was as sober as the Pope when I walked in. They said I was wearing a shirt that I had taken off previously that night because I spilled all over myself when doing a beer bong. I was never able to find the shirt they said I was wearing, but I know exactly which one they are all talking about. The friends I cruised with have no memory of the night at all. I started hallucinating images of people in my room for a few weeks after that night. I jokingly, half-jokingly, think they are images of people in other dimensions. So either 20 of my friends randomly decided to fuck with me and make up this elaborate prank, or I'm from a different dimension. Case file number 1109, written by Flustered Manatee, the photographer and the psychic old man. I was at an art fair in the arts district of the city I live in. A lot of the artists there use old warehouses as their own art studios. Me and my girlfriend walked to the very top floor of one of these warehouses after checking out almost every studio. No one seemed to care to go up that far in the building. We walk into this big open room with only 2 people in it. One was a woman in her mid-20s. She was a photographer with all her pictures and stuff on the wall, and the other was a skinny older guy, probably about 60. My girlfriend and I were looking at the photographer's photos when she whispers to me, "It's kind of awkward and creepy up here. We should go." We turn around to leave, and the older guy says to my girlfriend, "Here, this is from him, for your birthday soon." He hands her a picture of an old-fashioned bicycle, when of course, that was exactly what she wanted from me for her birthday, which was in about 2 weeks from that point. My girlfriend is shocked, and I asked him how he knew, and he just replies with a shrug. We're then leaving. He then says, "Be on the lookout, you know," and points to his glasses. A month later, she got a job offer as an optician. We still talk about it. It was absolutely insane. I don't even believe in psychics or anything. Case file number 1110, written by Selecta RX, Swirling Vortex in New Orleans. Perhaps the most insane glitch I've ever experienced was the time my ex-wife and I were walking down a street in New Orleans. I saw what looked like a localized heat haze effect on the sidewalk, maybe 20 feet up the street. Thinking it was just a steam vent or something, I was utterly shocked to see what I can only describe as a swirling vortex, not unlike a blue-colored version of the portals in Rick and Morty, roiling away on the surface of the sidewalk when I arrived at its location. I was maybe 21 at the time. I was stone sober at the time. I stood there, slack-jawed in wonderment, and my wife noticed I'd fallen behind. Coming back to see what the matter was, her eyes were drawn to where I was staring at the ground. Her face twisted into a mask of perplexed incredulity. "What the fluck?" she said. "Just to be clear, what exactly is it you're seeing?" I asked. "A swirling vortex in the middle of the sidewalk." We looked at each other dumbfounded and simply walked away. Her and I have verified this story numerous times as not being a dream or even mere suggestion, as the conversation before seeing this aberration of time and space certainly had nothing to do with quantum anomalies or anything of the sort. This truly stands as one of the all-time absolute glitch in the matrix experiences of my life and defies even the most ambitious explanation besides shared hallucination, the likelihood of which I won't rule out, but seems a bit 1 to 20 gazillion odds of randomness, and quite well outside the realm of possibility. The world is weird as fuck sometimes. Case file number 1111, written by Soma for Death 1. Connection I had with people I barely knew. I was packing up my suitcase to go and visit my dad and family in Wisconsin when suddenly I can just hear my mom's advice. Always take clothes for a funeral or a job interview. Which is silly, but it is something she says, so I packed nice clothes and head out. I got a call on Christmas Eve that some people I was pretty closely affiliated with had gotten into a car together after a night of drinking and ended up dying in a car wreck. Weirdest feeling I've ever had, because when I told my roommates that I had a feeling someone was going to die, they thought I was crazy. But here I was calling them to let them know that these two friends had passed away. What I find even more bizarre about it is that one of them, let's call him R, dated a friend of mine for years before I ever met him. When I did meet him, I always just felt a slight twinge of sadness around him. Always. And we ended up going our separate ways when I went to college. The other person, let's call him T, was actually a local celebrity in my college town and was good friends with my then boyfriend. The only thing though is that I had the same feeling of just kind of sadness or emptiness when I was around him, even though he was the life of the party. It's just strange looking back. Maybe my gut feeling was just telling me that I wasn't comfortable around them, because it is strange looking back and remember that sad, hollow, empty feeling and then feeling it again when I learned of them passing. Almost like I was expecting it to happen all of these years. But that could have been because of the life they led. They were huge partiers. It's a weird feeling though, that's for sure. Case file number 1112, written by Marmalade. Encountering an arcade bus in the middle of nowhere. Back before the PlayStation killed off coin-op games, I used to like visiting video game arcades. Anyway, I was riding home from work on a push bike at about 11 PM in this small Australian country town. My workplace was on the outskirts, and it was midweek, so the whole town had pretty much gone to bed already. The air was really still and kinda hazy, like a warm summer night. Anyway, I see this strange bus parked on the side of the road. All the windows are covered with white boards on the inside, and there are multicolored lights around the top of the bus. They're not lit. I can just see the colors from the reflection of the streetlight. It's parked outside a series of vacant blocks and opposite wetlands, and the closest house is a couple of 100 meters away. On the side of the road next to the bus is a small white folded sign that says Arcade in black letters. The door to the bus is open. There's not a person in sight, and the windscreen of the bus is dark as though it's tinted, although that was probably just the angle of the streetlight as well. I remember feeling really curious about the bus, but at the same time I was tired and hungry and just wanted to get home and eat dinner. So I rode home, fixed a snack, and thought about riding back past the bus to scope it out some more. I had that weird feeling then, like who the hell would set up a games arcade inside a bus and just park it randomly on the side of the road in bumfuck nowhere in the middle of the night, waiting for someone to show up with a pocket full of coins? It wasn't even a feeling like I was going to get murdered, because Australia is fairly short on creative serial killers. It was more like a feeling that the bus didn't quite fit in with reality. Of course, it was gone in the morning, and although I mentioned it to a few people, nobody had seen a bus like that around town. Case notes for file 1098. The Twilight Zone episode that happened in my room. So duplication glitches where the objects duplicated have specific anomalies or defects. Like you say in this case, the number was rubbed out for number 2, or the batteries were different kinds and they were completely matching in the other one. The object duplicated was an exact copy. So how do you fake that? I mean, you would have to have intimate knowledge of that. If it was a prank, it would be rather elaborate to even go out of your way to buy the exact same batteries and fade out the other button, and even like fading it out in the exact same way would be difficult. If this is a prank, I mean, it's exceptional quality. But honestly, it's Occam's razor, which is funny because we're dealing with duplication from multiverse events, but simply put, the most likely explanation is probably the correct one. In another world, you lost the remote too. It de-rendered because you weren't looking at it, and then it didn't re-render correctly when you were supposed to look at the spot where it's supposed to be. Instead of rendering over there where it was supposed to, it rendered in a different universe. Yours. And you know, if you think about how much information there is in the nearly infinite copies of our multiverse out there, how many copies of just that one remote there are? In so many other copies of the universe, it's insane. So it de-renders, an error code correction kicks in, restores an improper universe. Frankly, I'm surprised it doesn't happen more often given the vastness of the multiverse, how many things the simulation has to keep track of. Case notes are file 1099, the day the universe saved me. So I don't think freaky vibes necessarily need to apply to this. I don't think it's anything malicious. I think being open to the universe helping you to unlock subconscious pathways, otherwise dormant or suppressed. That's all that's happening. It's not magic in my mind, or even mysticism. It's just information and getting to it, decoding it, transmitting it to the conscious manifestation of our existence from our subconscious. That last part might be the hardest barrier to break through though, especially as adults. For most of us, we just feel this information as intuition. Sometimes people hear that inner voice boom and guide them as needed. Like in the case of the story where someone just heard a voice saying which paper to take when they were taking an exam, something along those lines. So it's not that we reshape the universe itself to our will exactly, it's like activating information hacks in a game, wall hacks. It tells you where you need to be going or what you need to be doing or where things are. But it's just as things are. It's not like manifesting a book from thin air. It was just saying where it was. Now it is odd that your booklet was in some random book that you never went into. Why was it there? Was that the glitch, that it de-rendered and re-rendered incorrectly in the book? Where you never would have found it? Maybe that's the actual glitch. And the other thing, asking the universe, is just, asking for help and it shall be received. The closest reference I can make would be taking an NZT pill from the movie Limitless. I freaking love that movie. And the show was great too. Damn shame it was cancelled. I think it was because it promoted drug use, but I mean, not really. How people interact with someone on a level of intellect that is beyond anything that can be comprehended unless you are on that level too. And I just love shows where there's a central protagonist that is incredibly smart, like The Mentalist or Sherlock. It's just so much fun. Case notes are file 1100, Entwined in Laos, A Story of Fate. Sounds like a cool adventure, but no electricity at night or the day, just like a few hours? Hard to imagine being able to function there. I need air conditioning to sleep. Sounds like a very cool little village though. Off adventuring for the day, coming back to the tavern to discuss the day's journeys, like living an adventurer's life centuries ago, or like a D&D adventure. So I kinda laughed out loud when you described the surreal otherworldliness of the coincidence, where you thought, oh, demons or aliens might be involved and they're just gonna appear any second now. Who knows, right? But yes, this is an extraordinary embodiment of the saying, what a small world it is. The world is unfathomably massive. So it makes you wonder how people can be so connected, entwined, to leading very similar roads traveled, when technically they're separated by enormous distances, or they could be. I think the bonds of love extend deeper than we can see. For quantum immortality, dying together and being transposed to the same universe together because of that soul entanglement, you could say, I think that applies. And now time for the quote of the day. Since it is so likely that children will meet cruel enemies, let them at least have heard of brave knights and heroic courage. Otherwise, you are making their destiny not brighter, but darker. C.S. Lewis. The world is a beautiful place, an immense place, an incredible place, but it is filled with light and darkness. If you only expose your children to the good parts, the sunshine and daisies and pizza and chocolate chips, I mean, that's good, expose them to that. But you need to make sure that they're aware that there are bad people in the world. There are monsters, in the colloquial sense. Not speaking of demons or anything like that. I'm just saying people that will try to manipulate them or take advantage of them or just harm them directly physically. To expose them to stories where there are these evils that are stood up against and fought bravely is so important. I think you want your children to have that brave spirit. And also be wise in knowing when to fight battles and when to retreat. Having that base level of courage baked in is very important. Case notes are file 1101. My car healed itself. Oh, so I was expecting another classic quantum immortality experience. But if everyone you know realized there was a cut that wasn't there anymore either, it wouldn't be evidence of universal switching. This has much eerier vibes as a result. Kinda get Truman Show feelings here. Someone must have repaired it, but for what reason and why a year later? Now, to be fair, it is entirely possible to repair a cut on a leather apparatus, like if you just have upholstery or any kind of skills like that. Technically, a friend could have done it, but they would have mentioned it unless they're trying to prank you, gaslight you, but I don't think they would. It definitely does strike me as something strange going on. Case notes for file 1102, a time loop of cash. So what a unique glitch, and the best kind. Loops of cash. Humans get caught in time anomalies all the time, ironically. No reason physical objects couldn't be too. I don't think it's a loop necessarily. I think time travel works through the multiverse in order to eliminate paradoxes. So, the money that traveled to you from the future, perhaps on some guaranteed level, but it was from a future you in a different universe. And then you repeat the pattern, but then it's another you in a different universe that'll receive those funds, set in the past of that alternate universe. It's kind of neat. And it does preserve the timelines in each separate universe because there's no paradoxes. If you go back in time and kill your grandma, well, you're just killing your grandma in that universe. So in that universe you won't exist, but in your original universe you do, so the timeline is preserved. There's no paradox because you didn't kill yourself, the person that actually went back in time. You're in a different universe. It would make sense if the simulation is structured this way, and there's all kinds of parameters in physics that operate this way to preserve the function of the universe, like the Lorentz transformation in terms of time slowing down depending on how quick you're going. We have a timeline where we're moving at 100% through time, and then if we increase our velocity through space, then the amount we're moving through time diminishes. It's an exponential curve, so the faster you go, there's not much difference. You're not really drawing much from your time pool, but as you approach the speed of light, the speed of causality, the speed limit of the universe, I like to say, if you have mass interacting with the Higgs boson, then you're drawing more from the time pool. Case notes for file 1103, the Great Nexus Past Disappearance. Sometimes DOP does seem to be like a poltergeist prank. Sometimes the item reappears as soon as the replacement card or utensil or whatever item it is that was taken is replaced, like a wallet too, or examples of jewelry, things like that. So I don't buy that as being random. Either it's a poltergeist, a spirit, or literally just a prankster in the real world or the simulation above ours that is literally just messing with us. And I could definitely see that happening because it's part of my spirit to mess with people. And if you want to have fun, I recommend the Just for Laughs YouTube channel. They have tons of pranks on there. And they're from my hometown of Montreal, and they're good. They mess with people, but in fun, wholesome ways. Now time for the quote of the day. Give a man a fire, and he's warm for a night. Set him on fire, and he's warm for the rest of his life. Terry Pratchett. Yeah, that's true. Man, I feel rather warm. Oh no. What's that, Ben? What are you doing? What are you doing, Ben? What's that? Yeah. What's that noise? You don't like the noise, Ben? What is that? Oh. What's that? Someone's at the door? How bad? Yeah, Ben. Look at all your fur on the floor. Oh my god. Case notes for file 1104. The moon moved faster than light. So there are ways to mess with perception. The angle of your viewing of the moon through the atmosphere at different elevations or different angles can sometimes be curved and appear to move when it's not, or even go out of view so you can't see it anymore, or see it when it's technically not in your line of sight because light is bending. Personally, I don't think the moon is fake or that we're on a flat earth or anything like that. But that said, there are a lot of reports of oddities surrounding our little lunar light, so I can't discount those. My favorite are the cases where the moon is described to ripple, like a projection that's out of phase. Are all of these merely atmospheric perception anomalies, distortions through the thick cloud that we live under? Maybe. But maybe there is more to it. I don't think it's fake necessarily, but maybe there are interactions on the moon that we're not. Case notes are file 1105. A duplicated purple Titan Wildcat mountain bike. So I love this because it's confirmation that duplicated items don't have to be small. Typically they are, but in this case, nope. An entire bike. Makes you wonder if people have entire cars duplicating. You think at a point that would hit the news though, What if all the gold in Fort Knox duplicated? Would they even tell anyone? Probably not. Maybe it'll rain down money. Case notes for file 1106, The Old Man's Warning. So I find it infinitely curious how our subconscious desperately attempts to convey information to our conscious experience of the world. It's like a waitress on rollerblades trying to bring out 10 dishes at the same time over a gravel road, but somehow she figures it out. And yet when it does, the pieces can be out of order, mismatched, packaged up in ways that don't necessarily make intuitive sense, but it's very clear the information was truthful, accurate in its core intent. It's a warning. But your mind was trying to interpret what the subconscious was giving you, so it was constructing a dream first, and then there was this old man. I don't know if the old man was identical from the one on the bus versus the one you saw in real life. There may have been a security guard there, but your mind just overlaid this appearance of an old man, maybe because to you respect your elders, and so you appreciate the warning of an elder more than if it was just some random person with a middle-aged or younger. That makes sense. And then of course the warning was conveyed to you in a way that you would accept, because if it was just like, this is going to happen, believe me, maybe you wouldn't have. It had to be more subtle to actually convince your conscious mind. And now time for the quote of the day. I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you've actually left them. Andy Bernard. You have to embrace every moment because you don't know where you're going to be in 5 years or tomorrow. It's that adage of living like you're not going to see tomorrow. I don't think that's necessarily conveying the full point. I think it's just embrace the future without knowing what it'll be and make the best of every day you can. Case notes are file 1107. The Fog, the Light, and the Duck. Oh my god, the memories of Howard the Duck are coming back to haunt me. I know the movie is supposed to be a comedy, but that movie terrified me as a kid. I don't remember the exact scene, I just remember Howard the Duck being terrifying. I'd be creeped out too if I was in this scenario, let's be honest. Although I'd be riding my bike, so I'd be more exposed to the duck. There'd be no barrier between the duck and me. Even though I can probably say from an outside perspective, it probably just was a duck meandering about and it wasn't evil. But who knows, maybe it was possessed by the devil. I wouldn't like that. And the fog does make you wonder. In all these situations where heavy, thick fog is around, creepy stuff happens. Case notes are file 1108. The unbelievable party prank that wasn't a prank. So there's overlap between all of the world's copies out there. For whatever reason, they sometimes bleed through. The images, sights, sounds, everything can be transmitted over, at least our perception of it. Our brains can receive the stimuli from those other worlds sometimes. In my view, merely as information that they're decoding. I don't think it's real in the same sense as you and I are within the original universe, or like the physical matter we can touch, like Dave here. In other copies of other universes, Dave is there, and the overlap is very close, I think, between these parallel realities. But if I saw another Dave somewhere, if I saw myself on the side of the office with another Dave on top, I think he's not really here. It's just my ability to see it. Now, I haven't seen it. That'd be cool, but not yet. I think this is good because it means that these are more like after images. They can't actually harm us. They're not really there. It's just a bit unsettling. The other possibility is you projected your soul forward, likely from intense emotions like anger and frustration, sort of like shedding the real you for a moment to say what you were really feeling towards your sister. You were just bottling it in before. Case notes are file 1109. The Photographer and the Psychic Old Man. So what is a psychic truly? I think it's a person whose brain is able to naturally decode and transmit the information on life's tapestry. Thing is, these instances are random. Even in the case of actual psychics, they can't just summon up the ability at will, or at least I've never heard of accounts of them being able to do so. So that's why if you approach a psychic and ask them, can you predict something for me? Well, they probably can't, because they're not really in control of it. They're just more likely to be able to experience these decoding events, you could say, which makes proving it much harder. If you're observing them, it has to be in that exact lucky moment to be on the receiving end of this kind of stupendous ability. Still, not magic, just amazing minds. And now time for the quote of the day. Art does not reproduce what we see. Rather, it makes us see. Paul Klee. It's all about perception, as they say. An artist has the ability to provide his perspective that is normally locked away inside his brain onto a visual format, or it could be written to, in a way for someone else that doesn't have that perspective to appreciate it and understand them a bit more. They say we're separated by an insurmountable distance. No one can truly know someone else because we can't be in their brain, their mind, or know their soul. Technically, because of electromagnetism, we can't even touch each other. Like if you're touching your finger, you're not really touching the mass, the atoms. There's a force that repels it. But through art, we can know each other better. Kinda beautiful, I'd say. Case notes are file 1110. Swirling Vortex in New Orleans. I think shared delusion is in itself fascinating, if it was that. I don't think that's what this was, but even if it was, that's evidence of two minds being properly linked. Kind of incredible. But no, I think this may be visual evidence of the space-time anomalies that everyone keeps encountering. My guess, had you stepped through it, you wouldn't have felt anything, but you would have been transported a ways away. Maybe not that far away, but there was another side portal, like in, Rick and Morty or Portal the game. Similar to that. It's just most of the time, we can't actually see the portals. I mean, what is sight? Sight is just having a light reach your eyeballs and decoded by your brain. So normally these portals, they exist, but they don't interact with anything. They don't, it's not like a black hole where light is bent around them or anything like that. It's just there without any visual stimuli emitting from it. So for some reason, this one was unstable maybe. That's why it was emitting light. Case notes are file 1111. Connection I had with people I barely knew. So that feeling of sorrow when you're around them. Let's call it subconscious leaking. I keep trying to conjure up apt analogies that convey what I'm thinking about this. Picture a dam in your mind. The subconscious being the mountainous ocean of water behind it, behind the dam, and all the information there that's out in the universe, and we were able to receive most of it. It's held back, and the conscious, our minds, our experiences of reality, which would be overwhelmed by all that knowledge, has just a small river running through it. It's like in Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull. People don't really like the movie, but at the end, where the person wanted all that knowledge, they show it to him, but his mind can't handle it. His eyes explode from all that information. And I think reality is similar to that. We can't handle all of it. So our subconscious has an important role to play in that they have to control what information our conscious experience receives. So the mind is constantly trying to balance how much to open the gate to let water through. Too much and the conscious may become catatonic, overloaded, or shut down entirely. And too little, well, you won't function very well. You'll be slow and not really able to function in reality very usefully. So it's that balancing act that some minds are better at least in certain circumstances, yeah. Case notes for file 1112. Encountering an arcade bus in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, if this was some serial killer or kidnap attempt, as you say, very innovative. Definitely would be upping the game from a white van with candy painted on the side. I'd probably have gone in myself, at least when I was a kid. At least I would have peeked my head inside just to give it a quick inspection. I'd be too curious not to. Perhaps a van from a parallel world, one where that area is actually much more urban and developed, or arcade buses are commonplace. Hell, honestly, not a terrible concept, maybe with a VR-inspired setup. So just move from town to town and have an arcade with a VR platform on board. The ones with the omnidirectional treadmill, so you can physically move walking and you're not limited by space. It's a very cool idea. I'm not quite there yet, but... And now time for the quote of the day. Honest disagreement is often a good sign of progress. Gandhi. Even if you disagree with someone, if you're able to civilly debate or discuss it, and then reach the end where you say, okay, we don't agree, but we can go our separate ways, no harm, no foul. That means that there's no antagonizing force between you two. So it means you are much more likely to consider what their point was, because it's unlikely that you're going to be convinced of something in the debate itself. It's going to take more time to mull it over. Whenever I've changed my mind, it wasn't on the spot talking to someone, it was after the fact, where I was contemplating what they were saying and trying to incorporate it in my worldview or as a fact or whatever it was. But if you leave in a conversation or debate on heated terms, then your emotions take over. Then it's not about if what they say was true, then it's about winning or losing. So that's where it doesn't work. So the key, I think, is honest disagreement, because that can lead the way towards actually two people trying to find the truth rather than just win a game. Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Kinetic Symphony signing off.